Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of the PMD Tea Buyers Club. I'm your host, Dananjaya. Today is a very different PMD Tea Buyers Club. It was going to be about 3 new green teas that I've got to taste. They're still in the packet, and instead I have whiskey, Glenfarclas whiskey. Now anyone who follows me on my own personal Instagram at PMD_silver will know that outside of tea, my next great love is not wine, it's actually whiskey. And I love spending time sipping on a few drams. I've got a few friends that I like to enjoy my drams with. A lot of them tend to be up in Scotland, which is why I like going up to Scotland so much. But today I'm talking about Glenfarclas whiskey, and the reason being is that I'll give you the backstory of how we get this whiskey, and then I'll tell you why I'm tasting it today. Or maybe I'll hint at why I'm tasting it today, because I don't want to give away the whole story. But every year, or almost every year, I head up to Scotland for a week. It's my 1 week of where I go and I get to relax. We visit distilleries, we walk, and I usually go with my brother or a good friend of mine. And last year, in 2017, we decided to go to Speyside. Now, Speyside is the malt whiskey capital of the world. There are God knows how many distilleries in the region. It's up in the north east of Scotland, and it's within the Highlands, and it's a separate region. So big names. Big brand names like Glenlivet, Macallan, Glenfiddich that you would have heard of, maybe even Balvenie, they are all from the Speyside region. So we went up to Speyside last year. Nadeem who shoots all the video for PMDT, follow him at Nadeem49. We went up to Speyside. We did a few distilleries, we did a bit of camping, did some walking, and we went to Dufton. Now Dufton is the home of Glenfiddich whiskey. Anyone who knows Glenfiddich, you'll know that it's the world's largest single malt brand. Cracking stuff they make there. So we get to Dufton, we go into this small little pub, beautiful cozy little pub called the Seven Stills, and if you ever go to Dufton, certainly visit there. The food is great, wonderful people, and of course they've got a huge whiskey selection. So we're in Dufton, we have a few drams, and we have dinner. And then we go back to the bar, and as we're going back to the bar, I see a gentleman sitting by the bar, big beard, and I just look at Nadeem and I say to him, Nadeem, do you know what, I know that guy, I know him from somewhere. And Nadeem says, you don't know him, it's because he's got a beard, you don't know the guy, just come here, sit down. And I'm looking over, and then I start to notice that this guy's looking at me, and I say to him, Nadeem, look, I'm telling you, I know this guy, I know him. I'm telling you I know him. And Nadeem again says, look, you don't know him. And we're flicking through the whiskey menu, and I thought, maybe I don't know him. As I'm flicking through this whiskey menu, and it's got, hundreds of whiskies on there, I come across this one whiskey that really catches my eye, and it's Glenfiddich, and it's a 1983 bottling. Now, Glenfiddich is an old whiskey distillery. It doesn't exist anymore, so, whatever's out there is pretty expensive stuff. And the reason why it caught my eye is because there is a Glenfiddich distillery, Glenfiddich tea estate in Muskelia. I see this and I think, it'd be cool, it'd be, real nice to have this. But a dram of this stuff is about £35. I still remember, it's about £35 for one dram. So I looked at Nadeem and I said to him, Nadeem, I bet you I know that guy over there. And if I know him, you buy me this glass of Glenfiddich. And if he doesn't know me, I'll buy you this glass of Glenfiddich. And Nadeem looks at me and says, yep, done. How could he go wrong? Here we are sitting in this small little pub in the middle of Dufton and Speyside, and I'm doing a bet with him for this dram. So I asked the bartender, I say, hey, who is that guy standing over there, with the big beard? Who is he? So the guy behind the bar has no idea. He walks over and asks this gentleman, sorry mate, what do you do for a living? He turns around and says, I'm actually the Glenfiddich ambassador. And then I realized that's where I know him from. I had met Struan Grant Ralph, who is the Glenfiddich brand ambassador for Glenfiddich in Sri Lanka at the Goldface Hotel. He was visiting Sri Lanka to promote Glenfiddich whiskey. I was going through the hotel and I bumped into the guy and we exchanged a few words. And then months later, I think almost maybe even a year later, here I am seeing him in his backyard in Dufton. So I turn around and say to him, I know you, don't I? He looks at me, Struan, and says, I think I know you. Nadeem at this point almost falls off his bar stool and breaks his hip because he's just lost £35. And we get talking to the boys from Glenfiddich. The next day we went and had an amazing tour at Glenfiddich. I really recommend anyone who's going up to Dufton to do that tour. But the story of how Glenfarclas comes into all of this is because I didn't cash in my bet with the Glenugie. I thought, you know what, I've got £35 in the bank, I'll just wait. And when and I said to him, I'll wait to call in my bet. And what he said was, before we leave Speyside, before we left at the end of the week, you know, I had to call in my bet. So either he bought me a dram from somewhere, or he bought me the Glenugie or something. So when we did the Glenfarclas tour, he turned around and said, what about I buy you a bottle of whiskey? And I decided on buying, you know, cashing my bet in for this bottle of Glenfarclas. Now it's a little more than £35, but you do get a lot more than just one dram. And I said to myself, and I said to Nadine, when I got to this certain point, I don't want to reveal what that is, when I get to this certain point, I will open it. And this morning, we reached that point in the company. So this is why I'm opening this. And instead of having my green tea and doing this video for you, that's why we've got Glenfarclas. So let me give you a bit of information about Glenfarclas, a totally different tea buyers club, but we'll do green tea next week, or maybe we'll have to even do green tea tomorrow because we've got to come up with a purchasing decision for this. So what can I say about Glenfarclas? Well, Glenfarclas is, again, a Speyside whiskey. It's a family-owned company. It's not like your larger whiskey houses that are owned by Diageo or from Chivas. It's a family-owned company. It is probably one of my favorite distilleries that I've been to, and I really like small independent distilleries. And I think it's just out of chance that I'm wearing my Springbank Society polo on, but I really like small independent family-owned distilleries. I think there's something so much different about the types of whiskey that they do, and this is something that you notice when you go to Glenfarclas. It's not a huge distillery. I think they do possibly about just around about 1 million litres of whiskey a year. So it's a little larger than Springbank that does, I think, about 750, and it's always very hard to come about their whiskey. But the attention to detail and the family ethos that they bring onto site is really, really evident. So when you go, when we did the tour, a wonderful girl called Daisy took us through. In fact, I'm still in contact with her today. I believe that she went to Sri Lanka about a week or so ago on her honeymoon. So Daisy, I hope you had a good time on honeymoon and that you enjoyed Sri Lanka. Hopefully it wasn't too wet. But this is something that you see all the way through. So as we're doing our tour of Glenfarclas, you're literally walking through the site and they'll turn around and say, well, look, that's actually where the owner lives. You know, when we went into one of the dunnage warehouses, completely off tour, off scripted. One of the warehousemen walks in and just says, I've actually got to taste. I've actually got to pull a sample out of this, 25-year-old cask. Here it is. Does anyone want to have a taste? Completely unscripted. And you don't get that with a lot of the other sort of larger brand-owned distilleries, where it's very clinical. Here, there's much more of a family feel to it, which is very nice to see. And at the end of the whole tour, when you go through, you go into this beautiful room. I believe their tasting room used to be the inside of a ship, and they managed to take the whole of that and put it into their tasting room. So the tasting room has these beautiful oak panels, the original tables from the ship. It is stunning. It's probably one of the best tasting rooms I've been to. So a real family-friendly atmosphere. 3 large stills, probably the largest on Speyside and also in Scotland as well. And most importantly, dunnage warehouses. When I went in 2017 August, I think they had about 30 plus dunnage warehouses, and that makes a real difference. It makes a real difference to the character of the whiskey. And the other thing that I really like about their whiskey, aside from the fact that it's our farm, aside from the fact that they have large stills in their dunnage warehouses, is the way that they actually do it. So if you look here, 46%. Very different to a lot of other normal malts that will come in at 40, so you get a lot more flavour when the alcohol percentage is higher. And most importantly, one of the key things that I look for when I look at buying whiskey is this. It writes it on the back of the bottle. Natural colour, more complex than other younger whiskies, lots of body, superb balance of sherry and malt. And the key word there is natural colour. That's something that I personally like to look for when I buy my whiskey, because what a lot of people don't realise is to get that colour in whiskey, a lot of whiskey distilleries will use E150A, which is caramel colorant, which will give a fake color to the whiskey. And a lot of people seem to think, with tea, that the larger the leaf, the better the tea is, and that the darker the whiskey is, the better it is. It's not at all the case. You can color doesn't actually denote the quality of a whiskey. But let's get into this actual whiskey. So let's have a nose of this. Big sherry hit. One thing Glenfarclas are known for is the types of casks that they use, and they use a lot of sherry cask maturation. In fact, I believe that they have a deal with a sherry house where they get all of their casks from, which is what gives Glenfarclas that, you know, that signature sweet character that you find in all of their whiskies. And this is the 15-year-old. So on the nose, big sweet sherry nose. Noses of vanilla, toffee, maple syrup. Very sweet whiskey, very sweet. And this glass actually, usually one of the things that I do actually when I visit whiskey distilleries is I collect glassware from that particular distillery. And this is very unusual actually. I don't have a glass like this. I picked this one up even though they had the normal Glencairn tasting glasses. The reason why I picked this up was because I hadn't seen this type of glass in any of the others, and I've got tons of Glencairns, the small ones, the large ones, and it didn't really matter whether it had Glenfarclas on it, so I thought maybe try something a little different. Very good for tasting. It really gives you the smell when you use a good glass as opposed to those large big tumblers. Let's give this a taste. What a wonderful whiskey. Big, meaty taste on the palate. Very thick, very syrupy. You're really getting that taste of that vanilla, that sweet sherry, you know, right in your mouth on the sides of your palate. And the 46%, I think the fact that the alcohol content is high, it really carries the flavor. I'm just gonna add some water to it. And again, I picked up this at Glenfarclas as well. I've been waiting for this day for quite some time. I finally made it here. So let's add a bit of water. You add a bit of water. It brings out so many other notes. Again, much more of a toffee flavor coming through in the middle of your palate. That sherry note is really enhanced. Sweet almond note coming through. What a wonderful whiskey. I'm so glad we've actually done this as an episode because I can, for now, forever remember when I finally opened this bottle of Glenfarclas. By no means am I a whiskey reviewer. I just happen to have an interest for whiskey, and it certainly reminds me drinking this why I need to get up Scotland again. If you want to find out more about whiskey, I'd visit someone like Ralphie's channel. But that's all I've got for you guys. Tune into next week's PMD Tea Buyers Club where we'll get back to drinking tea and not drinking whiskey. I'm going to get back to enjoying my dram, and I'll catch you all on next week or even tomorrow's show if I have time to taste these green teas.